Alright, it's time to talk about the Pac-12 recruiting classes. Let's start with the top dog in Oregon. They have a 9-man class that's 16th overall and a 90 rating. Now with Oregon, they've had some dark times since Chip Kelly left. But now it looks like they're starting to rise up again, and that's really good. And what's also good is the fact they're recruiting at a very high level. The past few classes, they've gotten some really good players, including the number 2 overall player in last year's class. And it's no different this year. They've gotten some really good players. Alright, let's move on to Stanford with their 7-man class that's ranked 33rd overall with a 91 rating. Now with Stanford, they tend to get their kids later on because, unlike other schools, Stanford is a big academic school. When I mean big, you gotta make sure that you have really, really good grades to get into Stanford. So that's why it takes them a while, because they have to make sure these kids are going to qualify. If they don't qualify, then why would you go after them? And with their academics, they're going to attract a lot of attention from kids that value academics as well as athletics. So when you have a really good football team to go along with one of the best academics in all the country, yeah, you're going to get kids' attention, and they tend to get some really good players. Up next is California's 7-man class that's ranked 42nd overall. They have an 86 rating. Now, with California, they're kind of an up and down team. They can have some really good seasons, or they can have some really bad seasons. But with them, they have to make sure that they, within their own state, are identifying underrated players. That's going to be the bread of their recruiting classes. They can find some underrated players in California, which is quite possibly the biggest football state when it comes to recruiting. Then they're going to be just fine. And they're very consistent with their recruiting. You take a look at the numbers, it's very consistent. It's very similar throughout the years. Up next is Washington 5-man class, 47th overall, 87 rating. Now, what Chris Peterson has done at Washington has been amazing. He's gotten them to a point where they can win consistently and also compete for the college football playoff. And I don't expect that to change at all this year. I expect them to still be a really good team and still compete for the Pac-12 championship. And with them, they just got to keep playing at a high level and they'll get kids. Alright, they've had some really good recruiting classes. I don't expect this to be any different as long as they're still playing at a high level. Alright, this is a big season for Colorado. They have a 5-man class that's ranked 53rd overall and an 86 rating. Now with them, they have a new head coach in Mel Tucker, and they've got to have performance on the field right away if they want to show kids that they are on the right track. If they can do that, they can start getting some of their top targets, but if they can't, it's going to be a long year for them. Oregon State's up next with a 5-man class, 55th overall, and an 85 rating. Now with Oregon State, they were one of the worst Power 5 teams in all of college football last year. They went 2-10 and they were blown out often. Oregon State has got to show improvement on the field if they want to get some solid kids for their recruiting class. There's no question about it. Up next is USC. 4-man class, 57th overall, with an 88 rating. Now, this is Clay Hilton's last chance to show that he is the right guy to lead USC. This is his last chance. Fans do not like him one bit. So he's got to do something to show that he is the right guy. And that also comes with recruiting. If they have a good season, if he can keep his job, then they can start getting some really good recruits. But until that happens, it's going to be tough for them to recruit because you don't know if he's going to stay or not. Arizona State is up next. 4-man class, 63rd overall, 86 rating. Now, Herm Edwards had a really solid season last year. Arizona State, they got some pretty good wins, and they got to a bowl game. That's a good first year for a guy like Herm Edwards. And in recruiting, he got some big wins in recruiting, including Jalen Daniels, one of the top quarterbacks in all the country. So if Arizona State, again, is able to get to a bowl game and be competitive in some of the big games, they're going to have another very solid recruiting class. Washington State's up next. This is another 4-man class, 70 overall, and an 84 rating. Now, at Washington State, they just find players that they know are going to fit onto their team, and it just works for them. They are one of the better teams in the Pac-12 because they are good at what they do. And I don't expect this year to be any different. I expect them to be solid on the field and just able to find guys in recruiting that are going to fit their team. Arizona's right behind Washington State, 71st overall with their 4-man class with an 83 rating. Now, with Arizona, they need to find some underrated players and take some chances. Take some flyers on some kids. You never know who's going to work out. Like other teams, they need to have a good season. To get some of their top recruits, they got to make sure that they have a solid season, and they'll be good to go. UCLA is up next. They got a 3-man class, 75th overall, with an 86 rating. Now, the big thing for UCLA is to make sure they can produce on the field. They were 3-9 last year. So in year 2 of the Chip Kelly era, they've got to do better if they want to continue to get some top-rated kids. They do get top-rated kids. However, if they keep having 3-9 seasons, they're not going to do that. They got to show improvement on the field. And finally, we have Utah, who only has one kid in their class right now. So they're 105th overall. That kid has an 85 rating. Now, the interesting thing with Utah is, last year they won their division. They were in the Pac-12 championship. So if they have another very solid year, they're going to reap the rewards of that in recruiting. But we just don't know what's going to happen with their recruiting right now because, like I said, they only have one kid. So once they start to fill out their class a little more, we'll see how their recruiting class goes. All right, guys, that was the Pac-12. Only one more Power 5 conference to go, and that's the SEC. See you then.